Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News Weekend. RoseAnne Archibald was ousted as the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations Wednesday evening. It happened at a special Chiefs meeting held virtually. Just over 70% of the 231 ballots cast voted in favor of removing the National Chief. But as APTN's Fraser Needham reports, Archibald may be gone for now, but the fallout at the AFN appears far from over.
Nova Scotia Regional Chief Paul Prosper is one of those in leadership who supports Archibald's ouster. He says the AFN had little choice after an internal human resources investigation raised serious questions about the National Chief's treatment of staff.
Harassment was found to exist on and further to that, there was breach of confidentiality and reprisal, that is retaliation, against all 5 complainants. So these are serious findings that required immediate action.
But Chief Joe Alphonse remains steadfast in his support of Archibald. He says the way the National Chief was removed lacked due process and reflects poorly on the organization. The 163 leaders who voted in favor of Archibald's ouster is less than a third of the more than 600 First Nations the AFN represents.
What happened yesterday to give your National Chief a boot, that doesn't send a very strong message. It sends a message of a weak organization, that any person or any issue from here on out can be overturned, and that's a sad thing,
Outagaming First Nation Chief Jeffrey Kopanats also supports Archibald. He told the virtual assembly the reason she was removed was because she is a woman, plain and simple.
This is just all about gender. I've never seen any other stance like this politically against any other former National Chief, and everyone knows I worked for National Chief Sean Atleo as well, and this was nothing like that at all. AFN needs a Me Too movement. It really does. And I think if there was a Me Too movement, then maybe some of the regional chiefs would be held accountable.
Joan Jack is a Manitoba lawyer and activist, and she agrees.
I don't think treating the first Indigenous woman this way is the appropriate response from our community. I've had experiences, minimal experiences at the AFN and other NGOs within our politics, and based on my own lived experience, misogyny is alive and well.
At an AFN assembly in July 2022, Archibald put forward a resolution that calls for a forensic audit of the organization, which passed. Prosper says the Chiefs Committee is working on implementing the audit, but it is not clear when this will happen.
They have been in the process of trying to secure the necessary funds to undertake that forensic audit. And so those efforts will continue.
The AFN Summer Assembly takes place in Halifax, July 11th to 13th. Fraser Needham, APTN National News, Ottawa.
Archibald is expected to make a statement on Monday. You can find more on our website, aptnnews.ca. A recent investigation launched by BC's Children and Youth Representative details a horrific case of abuse against 2 Indigenous children in care, where one of the children died. The First Nations Leadership Council has called for the immediate resignation of Mitzi Dean, the Minister of Children and Family Development. First, a warning that this story contains upsetting and graphic details. APTN's Tina House has more.
I'm joined today by Grand Chief Stuart Phillip of the BC Indian Chiefs, who's also on the First Nations Leadership Council. Grand Chief, the Council just recently called for the resignation of the BC Ministers of Children and Families. Why is that?
It's because this particular case is one of the most horrific tragedies involving the death of a child in memory in the province of British Columbia. It's absolutely horrible. These children were brutally beaten for a number of months. They were starved, and they were forced to eat their own vomit, and there was feces also. And I have never heard anything as, as absolutely horrible in this particular case. It's outrageous. There was evidently no oversight, no regular checkups or anything of that nature, which is part of the responsibilities of the ministry. And now that it's become a public issue, the so-called parents, foster parents, received 10 years in jail, but in my mind it should have been at least 25 years each for both of them, yet it wasn't. So we're absolutely outraged that there hasn't been a very severe, decisive response on the part of the ministry, on the part of government, and certainly on the part of the justice system. It's been a complete, colossal failure of defending the rights of children. Unacceptable.
Grand Chief, I understand it was two siblings. One of them passed away, but the other one, I'm sure, deals with trauma every day from their experience. What can be done to overhaul this system that we're seeing with the BC Ministry of Children and Families in this province?
Well, the tragic reality is this isn't the first time we've had the tragic death of a child in care in British Columbia. And there's always the commitments on the part of the new incoming minister that things will change, that policies will become more rigorous and there'll be greater oversight and so on and so forth, and yet that never materializes. It's the same laissez-faire, negligent approach to childcare at the expense, and in this case, the life of a young child. I have grandchildren the same age as these children, so you can imagine, how angry and infuriated we are.
Grand Chief, I know that the minister did a Zoom call and responded to the calls for resignation. What are your thoughts on her answers there?
It was deeply disappointing. It was frustrating. The minister continues to respond to all questions with the three speaking points that she expressed to the mainstream media when this story first broke. Basically, it's a terrible tragedy that these children were abused. She refuses to acknowledge that there was a death involved, the death of a child. And she says, basically, we need to do better and we will do better. I mean, that's, we ask, what happened? Where did it go off the rails? And she absolutely refuses to answer those questions.
Grand Chief, thank you so much for joining us today, and our condolences to the family and the community in this terrible tragedy. Back to you in studio.
Now, APTN has contacted Dean's office but did not receive a response. The minister posted a statement to the province's website that says, in part, "I am heartbroken at what these children endured, and I extend our deepest apologies and condolences to the family, friends, and communities that have been impacted by this tragedy." To Northern Ontario now, where the Ontario Provincial Police say there is an ongoing investigation into the deaths of 13 Indigenous people in Thunder Bay between 2006 and 2019. The call for the new investigations came in a confidential report obtained by APTN News and other media outlets last year. The OPP states in an email its intention is to take a victim-centered, trauma and culturally informed approach to investigate the circumstances leading to the deaths. They say family and friends deserve to know what happened. 50-year-old Robert Musco-Tawani was one of the 13. His body was found in the Kaministiquia River in 2015. After an investigation by Thunder Bay Police, his death was ruled accidental. But in an email from Robert's son Ronald, he says he was notified by the OPP of the reinvestigation 3 weeks ago. Ronald says the OPP can't say much, but that the investigation may take a year or two. You can find much more on this case that APTN Investigates looked into on our website, aptnnews.ca. Well, it's grad time, and coming up after the break, we'll take you to a special celebration in Winnipeg's North End. Stick around. Welcome back to APTN National News Weekend. It's a Winnipeg neighborhood most often characterized by crime and poverty. But earlier this week, the North End showed a strong sense of community as dozens came out to support the grade 12 graduates from 3 area's high schools. APTN's Leanne Sanders has that story.
They came with singing and drums to take part in the 2nd annual North End Grad Walk down gritty Selkirk Avenue. Lieutenant Governor Anita Neville, Mayor Scott Gillingham, and the school principals joined in. Organizer Michael Redhead Champagne said it's all about showing the grads they've got the community behind them as they move on.
For me, as a graduate of a North End high school, I know how important and how special it is when somebody graduates from a community that has lower income and difficulty with graduations. And so I wanted to celebrate the successes of the students here.
One of those succeeding is Desmond Bushy. He's been part of a teacher development program called Build From Within. It'll allow Bushy to one day end up with an Education Assistant Diploma Bachelor of Arts and finish with a Bachelor of Education degree. He says the community support is important.
Because most of our parents, there's a good chance most of them haven't graduated. So it's a first step in trying to break a cycle to try to create a better life for the people in this area. So knowing that walking through the streets here and having everyone cheer us on lets us know that we're doing something worthwhile.
The walk ended with a barbecue for the grads and their families. Proud mom Vanessa Assiniboine will see daughter Aaliyah graduate on Wednesday. She said students in the North End have a lot of barriers to overcome to get to grad.
There's a lot of challenges out there for people, especially in low-income areas, barriers that we have to work through together as a family and individually, and it does make us stronger too at sometimes, so you got to have a lot of hope and spirit in that.
I think what I wanted the graduates to know is that when they graduate from high school, they are succeeding and they are winning, but it's not a victory just for them. It's a victory that their entire family feels, and even all of us as North Enders, people that live here and love this place, it's our victory as well. And so the North End Grad Walk really is an opportunity for all of us to come together and show these graduates how proud we are of them and that we got their back.
Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
For all of June, TikTok Canada celebrated National Indigenous History Month by putting a spotlight on some of its top Indigenous content creators. Tamara Pimentel has more.
Since the creation of TikTok, Indigenous youth have been using the platform to share their stories and culture. TikTok is recognizing those making an impact on and off social media. With its list of Indigenous TikTok visionary voices, 9 youth, creators, industry disruptors, and small business owners are showcased. Cree and Two-Spirit fashion designer Scott Wabineau made the small business owner list. They own the genderless streetwear brand Wabineau and use their platform to advocate for Indigenous LGBTQ2S+ youth.
For the longest time, we've just never been looked towards, as people, we've been, I feel like a lot of people are, under the impression that Indigenous people are of the past, when in reality, we're still very much alive today.
Jen Harper is an industry disruptor with her brand Cheekbone Beauty. Her makeup products recently made it into 52 Sephora store locations across the country.
To be able to bring a brand to to life that does have this tone of representation. It's really been about who we are from the beginning.
This is the first list of Indigenous visionary voices for TikTok. Labano and Harper say it's a true step toward reconciliation.
There's so many incredible creators, and they've developed programming for Indigenous creators. I just love watching what they're doing for our community, and I think it's really like a solid effort for sure.
I think it's really important to just connect with our community and remind them of our power.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
To the north now, and Nunavut's newest top cop is hoping to build bridges between the RCMP and Inuit. Trevor Wright has that story.
Nunavut's newest commanding officer, Chief Superintendent Andrew Blackadar, was officially sworn in early June. One of his main goals is to improve relations between the RCMP and Inuit.
I can tell you one thing we need to do is build trust with the community. That's a big piece for me. That would be lasting change, as if we could build a lot more trust between Nunavut and the RCMP.
Blackadar says they're trying to bring more Inuit onto the force.
With respect to our regular member recruiting, we are trying very hard to bring more Inuk-speaking recruits into the RCMP, and hopefully having them come back here to the territory to work. We have, I believe, 6 or 7 Inuktitut-speaking members of the RCMP in the territory, hoping to increase that as we can recruit more.
Supplementing this are 2 Inuktitut-speaking OCC operators who answer emergency calls and related duties. Like regular members, this position requires extensive training. Despite ongoing efforts, recruitment is slow in a territory which has a sordid history with the RCMP. To build trust, Blackadar is looking to bring in 15 officers trained in community policing through the First Nations and Inuit policing program over the next few years.
It's basically regular police officers that we have within the RCMP. They apply, they'll have to demonstrate that they're competent in community and cultural profiles, that they have a desire to live and work in our smaller remote communities, that they have a desire to work with the communities. It'll be a tripartite agreement involving the community. So what the program may look like in King 8 is going to be different than the community in Arctic Bay.
As part of the agreement, Nunavut RCMP will be reporting regularly to Public Safety Canada and the Government of Nunavut. Blackadar hopes it'll help serve as a pipeline for Inuit recruitment.
It's also a way, or I'm hoping that it will be a way to recruit more Inuit from the territory to join the RCMP.
He adds it'll be a lot of work to be done for the RCMP to rebuild that trust. However, right now, there's nowhere to go but up.
It's going to take us a long time to get to that ideal state, but at this point, the door's open. The RCMP is willing to learn, willing to work with the community, and willing to make Nunavut a safer place to be.
Trevor Wright, APTN National News, Iqaluit.
A well-known human rights activist has passed away. We'll look back on the impact of Dan Paul's work after the break. Welcome back to APTN National News Weekend. Indigenous athletes are just weeks away from the 2023 North American Indigenous Games. In the Western Arctic community of Inuvik, 2 teens are busy practicing and fundraising to join the NWT team for volleyball. Carly Schogner has this.
It's the end of the school assembly, and Matthew McLeod and Larry Sittachinley set up the nets to practice their serves. For the furthest they've traveled to represent their small Beaufort Delta community of Aklavik.
We heard about the NAG tryouts, and it sounded exciting to go out of town to do other stuff that we love. We always like to play sports or go out on the land.
Us were the only ones from the Beaufort Delta selected.
It's pretty exciting. I never traveled right that far. Halifax, that would be the furthest I traveled.
The Gwich'in and Inuvialuit community of under 550 people Aklavik is a 2-hour commute to Inuvik through the winding channels of the Mackenzie River by boat or ice road or small airstrip. As many of the communities within the region, it becomes isolated during the spring and early winter during breakup and freeze-up. Out of the 16 games featured at the North American Indigenous Games, the teens chose volleyball.
It stuck out to me from the other sports. There's a lot of movement in the sport.
Volleyball is probably one of my, close to my favorite sports because it's active. A lot of people play it. Tournaments all happen, and it's just a fun game to play.
For the outgoing Moose Kerr School principal who's offered to help with some coaching, he sees this as a long time coming because of their dedication.
Matthew and Larry have worked very hard. They're enthusiastic. Their character is shining all the time. They're very helpful. They're at school every day. It's the attitude that makes the difference. And I think if they can combine that athleticism with their attitude, they're going to go a long way.
With well over $1,000 for one flight to the NWT capital, the community steps up to help raise funds for them to go, including $800 to practice beforehand with the full NWT team in Yellowknife.
It's good to see them, good youth, have that chance to participate in activities like this, and, you know, keep doing what you're doing, you know, keep being yourself, you know, keep presenting your cultures and your values out there, and, you know, it's gonna go a long ways.
The teens say they find well-being through sports and being out on the land. And it's paying off, as for Matthew's spring regional skidoo race placings and feature in a studio album to be released at the end of the month of the song named after the community's motto, Never Say Die.
It's a small community, so we'd always try to find places to go or something to do around here. We'd always be with our friends. Don't let other people bring you down when you're trying to do new things, like different sports that you're trying to get better at. Just cancel them out of your thoughts and do your best at what you're doing.
Volleyball tournaments start in Halifax on July 17th. Carly Schogner, APTN National News, Aklavik.
Great message there. Less than 2 weeks to go before the start of the games. Going to be some fun times. Well, some sad news to leave you with tonight as Dan Paul, a Mi'kmaq elder, author, and human rights activist, has died at the age of 84. Paul was the author of We Were Not the Savages, which revealed that brutal colonial government tactics were responsible for the decline of Mi'kmaq people. His work made a huge impact, most recently on naming practices in Nova Scotia, where the province's first governor, Edward Cornwallis, was often honored despite his policy that offered bounty awards for Mi'kmaq scalps. Our hearts are with his family and the Mi'kmaq community. And that will do it for us here this weekend. You can always find much more over on our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.